Florida State is poised to make big-time coaching moves.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, as new customers can place a $5 bet and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And speaking of getting started, I'll go through both coaches momentarily, but I was a little concerned going into this process of hiring new coaches where Florida State would go. Apparently, I was wrong, and quite frankly, I think a lot of people were. Good for the Noles. It sounds like they're ready to spend because Tony White, defensive coach, and a really good one at multiple stops now at Nebraska, is going to be the defense coordinator for what it sounds like. Multiple reports, Pete Thamel, etc., on three rivals. Different outlets have all reported it. And just as important, because we've talked about this for a long time, his defensive line coach is rumored to be coming with him as well. Again, none of this is official as I record this, but Terrence is if you remember the name again, Terrance Knighton, nose guard, defensive tackle in the NFL for 7-8 years. Washington, Jacksonville, Denver, finished up in New England on the practice squad for a year. That's a guy that can really recruit at a crucial spot. So before I get into Knighton and whatnot, let's talk about Tony White and why it's important. Two things here. Number one, you have a guy that's winning at a program, no offense to Nebraska, because it's modern day Nebraska we're talking about, where it is much more difficult to get the players there. Winning at Nebraska today is getting 6 to 8 wins, in my opinion. I know Nebraska fans don't want to hear that, but this isn't 1995. Okay, that was one of the greatest teams of all time, that Tommy Frazier-led team, but those kind of players just don't go there anymore. They really don't. But that defense, I actually watched them play this past weekend. They're very stout. They don't give up hardly anything up front. The run gap fits are great. And again, I'll get into Terrance Knighton here in a minute. And they're just consistent. Are they getting 4 to 5 star talent? No. So what Tony White and Terrance Knighton are doing up front in particular catches my attention. So let's just kind of go through White's profile a little bit here. It's going to be a defensive change if this comes to fruition, and this is all contractual stuff now. How it ends up, we'll see. I don't have any numbers or how long it's going to be or anything. But again, if Pete Thamel posts it, it's a pretty good sign. And there are multiple outlets as well. So he's been a guy that went to UCLA, but he was born, ironically, by about as far away from Los Angeles as you can be, born in Key West. So it's Florida born, went to school at UCLA. He's been at the last 3 schools that he's been at, 2018 and 19. He was the corner coach / DB coach and defense coordinator at Arizona State. 2020 to 22, Coach White was at Syracuse as defense coordinator, and then Nebraska the last 2 seasons. Why is it different? This is the one thing I want to throw out. Why is it different to get him, and why I find it interesting? Florida State runs more of a traditional 4-2-5 defense, or base 4-3, but most teams in the spread, you're going to run 5 DBs. They run a 3-3-5 at Nebraska. And I did a little research, even though I'd watched them play, I wanted some more statistical analysis. They run that, but they use a bigger safety / linebacker as their hybrid player. Now, in the Big Ten, it's a little different than it is in the ACC, but it's not completely different. That hybrid player, sometimes I'm guessing they sub out for a corner. I'm going to get the guy that runs Locked On Nebraska or Locked On Huskers to come on here pretty soon. But for now, know that is the key spot. It's maybe a little different how they run it than Florida State does, but maybe they'll adapt. I need to learn more about it. But more importantly than anything, 3-man line is completely different. Terrance Knighton, the defensive line coach that's rumored to come, he's played like in a 0 tech, in a shade 1 tech. Those are really difficult players to find. Now, Florida State's historically done tremendous with D-line recruiting, but not as much here lately. But it would be a shift in your personnel, both at the D-line and linebacker level, perhaps a little bit with the hybrid spot there that lines up over the slot. So there could be some changes. We'll get into that more. But for now, 2 things that you should know about just how they play in general, and this is just from the eye test. Run gap fits are very sound. What did I complain about and Florida State fans complain about constantly the last several years? How come we give up those chunk yardage plays when it's a generic off tackle, quarterback run, something that there was nothing special about it, and the guy's just running through the second level, and all of a sudden he's not touched or he's barely touched? Run gap fits and mental stuff in general has been poor at Florida State too often, and just out of the blue. They'll be playing great, and then they just have this moment. That, to me, is why Fuller got fired. There's no nice way to say that. For years, it was the same thing over and over. And after you hit your head on the wall so long, you got to make a change. And they did. So good for Norvell. But getting White is a great sign. Here are the numbers just down the line. I put a bunch of stats from Nebraska this year. And again, they're not getting the same kids that like Florida State, Miami normally get. It's just reality. But here are their numbers in the 134 team FBS level. Rush defense, 105.8, 14th in the nation. That's a far cry from where Florida State was, I can assure you. Pass defense, 209.7, that's 52nd. Total defense, 315.4, that's 19th. Scoring defense, 19.8, that's also 19th. Sacks, they had 27, that's 50th. 20-yard passing plays or more, those chunk yardage plays that Florida State gave up way too many of. They were 29th in the nation by giving up 30. 20-yard runs or more, they only gave up 10 all year. That's 23 in the number 23 in the nation. They created 16 turnovers. That's 67th. Third down defense, they were pretty good. 32nd in the country at 34%. Red zone offense, 21.9%, 57th. Tackles for loss, 74. That's 43rd. If Florida State would just adapt the scheme, and they've got the size to run the 3-4 with some of the big guys they have and do some flex. I'll talk about that in a second. They could be in a completely different world because they're one of the few teams that has the ability to run the 3-4. It's really hard to run it, historically speaking. Why? The nose guard. The spot that Terrance Knighton played when he was in the NFL and played at Temple. You're not going to find many of those guys. Florida State's one of the few schools that historically has gotten them, and they got one in this class. Like Kevin Wynn, if they sign him with Terrance Knighton, that is the perfect fit. Like he's 6'2", 6'3", 320 pounds, and is a hustler, a guy that gets after it, will chase it. He is made for that. He could absolutely do it. That's why Georgia really wants to flip him from Florida State. Kirby Smart doesn't suffer fools, especially with D-line recruiting. He knows what he needs to get Georgia's defense back to an elite level. It's certainly not right now. It's too up and down. One of the reasons is they've been a little bit inconsistent at nose guard. They're not terrible by any means, but they're inconsistent. Florida State's a little bit the same. I mean, they've got Farmer Jackson. They're two good players and they're 4-3, but they've been inconsistent too. If Knighton can coach these guys up the way he did at Nebraska, and you've got White still running the same scheme, so it's plug and play, that would be very, very helpful. Your back end won't change near as much. It's not going to make a huge difference there, but Florida State would be in a much, much better situation. Also, this is important to note as well. Getting a guy like Knighton and White to have some rep might get you an extra player in the 26 class, 27 class that you didn't. Players want to go somewhere, they're going to get coached up and get to the NFL. So we'll talk about that in a second. I do want to go into more depth about this coaching situation with Terrance Knighton, why he's really important, and that is next here on Locked On Seminoles. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win that $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you place a bet in the middle of a game, you can check out all the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. I don't know what's going to happen with Odell Haggins before anybody asks, but to that end, getting Terrance Knighton would be great. By the way, shout out to Odell. He's been one of the great college football assistant coaches for a long time and has represented Florida State and quite honestly college athletics very well for decades. Hats up and hats off and thumbs up for him. Great guy, no matter what they do. I have a feeling he'll be around Florida State regardless if Terrence is on staff or not. We'll see. To that end, Terrence is a bona fide recruiter. I was just on the Nebraska message boards. They were freaking out about losing Terrance because, again, it's a different era. No offense to Nebraska. They're not getting the same kids. They know they need a guy that can help them get those players. They're about to take a hit if Terrance is truly coming with Coach White. And by all accounts, that's likely to happen. As of this recording, I do not have the final pieces, but that's what we're hearing. Also, if you can get him in and he's really, truly committed to go out and recruiting, he only needs one or two studs. I mean, Florida State's always taken, this even happened during the Bowden era when I was growing up, a lot of 3-4 star guys and coached them up. The 3-4 is built for that. The 3-3-5, same deal. It's built for that. Guys that you redshirt, it's about power. It's two gapping. It's a little bit different. Now, they might do some one gap stuff too. Today's football is different, but they want to be able to two gap some. Their linebackers, 230. They're a little faster. They're not quite like the 3-4 defense that Wisconsin ran a few years ago. They had 250-pound to 260-pound linebacker. They didn't run that scheme at Nebraska, but they're still going to have to be able to take on guards sometimes and some bigger guys. That's not an easy task. So the linebacker recruiting might change a little bit. I'm not sure. It depends on the exact type of three-man line they want to run and how they want to change up the gap scheme from play to play, how much of a multiple they're going to run. But again, I'm most excited about Knighton as a recruiter. I have preached for a very long time that if Florida State's going to get back, they had to win in the trenches. O-line, we still have to talk about. That's something they got to figure out, and they need an elite recruiter there to help fix this. And more than anything else, they need somebody instructionally that can maximize the kids on campus too. It's got to be a home run hire, whoever the O-line guy is. They are. It's not in question. But on the defensive side, if you got Knighton, that's about as A as you're going to get. He was in the NFL for about 8 years. He's going to get respect. He knows what it's like to battle. He's a kid that came up in Connecticut, ended up at Temple. He was not a star recruit. He had to grind. So he's going to see what both sides of this are like throughout his career and be able to relate to kids no matter if they were a five-star kid or they were somebody that was kind of developmental. Either way, he's going to be able to say, I went through it in some way, shape, or form because I was in the NFL to the five-star guys. And then the kids that came into Florida State that rolled under the radar, hey, I was at Temple and I still made it to the NFL. If you listen to me, you can end up there too. That's a great combination. So props to him in his career. He's only been a couple places. He was with the Carolina Panthers with Rule. He was at Wagner, and now he's at Nebraska. So he's not been in the coaching fraternity a long time, but he's been successful. And I find it very, very interesting that he's a guy that has not only done well, but has gotten as much respect. Like if you go to Nebraska boards right now, they're freaking. That's a good sign for Florida State. I'll have more on this as we come back around, but very excited for Florida State because they went out and they're making moves. They didn't just take the easy path and hire somebody local that was just an easy fit or whatever. They went after guys that are well-known, have done a great job in a tough circumstance at Nebraska. If these contracts get done, Florida State has hit a home run. I would absolutely tip my cap. This is as happy as I've been about what Florida State's administration has done, and I don't even know how long. Because it took guts to go after these guys, let alone try to sign them. Very, very happy for Florida State, and you should be too. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you making this community a part of your life. I enjoy it. Please help spread the word. Hit that notification bell. Hit that subscription if you have not already. And above all else, again, share this podcast. I want to get in front of as many Noles fans as possible. I will see you again as soon as more news breaks, but thank you very much and have a good one.